Prince Sultan University, we would like to welcome you once again to the first International Symposium on Applied Linguistics Research. I hope you all had an enriching day attending the many different sessions in the rooms, and we honestly do really appreciate you spending the day with us. My name is Maram Al-Khlair. I'm a lecturer in the Linguistics Department at Prince Sultan University, and I, alongside my two colleagues, Dr. Muna Salim from the Translation Department and Ms. Jawahar Al-Hakbani, a research assistant at the university, will be running the room for today. Before we start our last session, I would like to highlight that there will be time reserved at the end of the workshop for a question and answer session. If you have any questions, you won't be able to raise your hands. So instead, please leave your questions in the Q&A box that is located at the bottom of your screen. We will only be checking there for questions. Also, if you have any thoughts or comments or anything that you want to share about any of the sessions or about the symposium overall, please share them via Twitter using our hashtag, and we'll leave that in the chat box for you to conveniently copy paste. And one more reminder for our presenter, Mr. Bjorn, I will be flashing a 5-minute sign and a 2-minute sign to remind you of the time remaining. And as we've done with all of the talks for today, the workshop will be recorded and it will be made available to everybody later on, inshallah. All right, so without further ado, I want to introduce our next presenter. We have Mr. Bjorn Norbum. He works at the National Center for Assessment here in Saudi Arabia. Mr. Bjorn is a consultant at the National Center for Assessment, which is part of the Education and Training Evaluation Commission here in Saudi Arabia. He has acted as a lead test developer for several high-stakes language exams. His research interests include test validation, evidence-centered design, and the assessment of Arabic as a second or foreign language. He has presented papers at several top-level international language testing conferences and is also the author of several published book chapters on applied linguistics. The talk or the workshop that he'll be giving today is entitled Writing Effective Test Items for Reading Comprehension and Listening Comprehension. So, Mr. Norbum, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I am trying to share my screen. Could you just confirm
Yes.
you can see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me, and thank you for joining this. What I wanted to do today is I wanted to talk about aspects of writing tests for with specific focus on how to choose the passages or texts or any type of inputs that we need to stimulate through reading and listening, and then how to relate these to. So just like to mention first about.
Your voice is breaking up a little bit.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Just let me know if anything like that shows up. Thank you. Now, the ETech is a organization which is known in Arabic as of course, and the most well are the Qudarat exams that students take to enter university. Number of English language exams, as well as Arabic language exams. I'm not going to talk much about them here today, but we'll have the T, which is the English placement test to English exam. So if you look at the content, you can see that I'm going to walk through a few. I will talk a little bit about purpose of testing, a little bit about test specifications, then about how tasks are formed in listening and reading comprehension. Then we'll talk about passages and how to select them, model, analyze, and edit. Writing and review, and we'll touch very shortly at the end on post-test of items. Now, in the as part of this, we are going to also have some application where you will yourselves will also be writing. We have.
Mr. Norbum, I think it's still breaking up. Would it be okay if we paused and you maybe changed your connection and then re-entered the room? Is that possible?
It is possible.
Okay.
If you like me to. I can hear you very clearly, but if it's breaking up, I'm not sure if it's the mic or the internet.
We can try both. I mean, you can disconnect the mic and then, or simply exit and re-enter, and we'll see if it's the microphone. But if it persists, it might be the connection.
I will leave the meeting.
Okay, we'll do that.
Sorry about that, everyone. 1 minute, please.
No, happens. All right, apologies, everybody. We're just gonna give him a second to see if the issue is resolved.
Start with this and see what we have here for today. Now, when we are assessing, no matter if it's a large-scale assessments like we do, the ones we do at NCA, where we have, you know, in the vicinity of 150,000 to 100,000 test takers per year for our English exams, or if it's a very small quiz I'm trying to create for my students in the classroom, anything in between those, both those and anything in between, we really have to first think about what is the purpose of our assessment. Why are we doing this? So that it becomes a truly meaningful activity. Now, the purpose of testing is always to do some kind of gathering of information. We are trying to find out something about our students. That's what we should think about. That's how we should see it, no matter what scale or context we have. And we are then going to take this information and we're going to make some kind of interpretation of it. We will then use this interpretation to make some kind of decision. These decisions may be pass, fail on a course. It may be diagnostic decisions that we are making about our students, how to redirect or re-emphasize our teaching, or it may simply be accepted, non-accepted at university, and so on. And we hope that these decisions, or we're trying to make decisions that are going to give beneficial consequences. So getting these consequences from the testing is really what it's about. So if we take the example with classroom assessment, it may be to get consequences which are, I redirect my teaching, or I know the strengths and weaknesses of my students in general, or I can place my students accurately into my programs and so on. And then I can teach them more effectively because I have more homogeneous groups and so on. So you really need to think about this whenever you are preparing an assessment. What am I going to fill into these boxes for myself? So let me give you an example from the NCA, the standard test for English proficiency, STEP. We are trying to gather information over there about English academic skills, what the students are able to do in terms of academic English. We are trying to interpret their performances to give them cut scores so that we can say, have they reached CFR levels B1 and B2, or haven't they? And then decisions will be made about them. Normally, acceptance, non-acceptance into a program, right? Can they graduate from this program? Yes or no? Or are they ready to start their studies for masters and PhD in Saudi Arabia, maybe for a master's abroad, or a bachelor's degree here locally, and so on. And then we're trying to get consequences, beneficial consequences. In this case, only qualified students are accepted into these programs. Students that are not qualified should try to improve. They can then take the test again, and only when they are ready should they be joining the program. So this is really what the purpose of assessment is all about. Now, let's think about what a reading and listening task consists of. We will, on the sort of left part of the screen here, we have a box which is input or stimuli. This is where we have a text, a graph, a picture, a sound file, written or spoken text. And then we are going to have on the right side here one or more items that are related to this input. And these work together to create the task. And the term we use in testing for a text or some kind of input together with one or more items is a testlet. And obviously, there is a relation between the text and the items. You are going to want to have a text or a passage which is suitable for writing the types of items that you want. So we cannot separate the two. We have to see them as integrated and coexisting. Let's talk about passages or texts and how we can make sure or try to get as close as possible to getting suitable texts or passages for our testing. And this is both for reading and listening. We're going to have a process where we first select a text. We are then going to create a model of this text, and we will get into how to do that very soon. This will be followed by an analysis, which we are going to demonstrate. And then we may make some edits to the text, and then we are ready to use it. And the reason this is so important to take this as a separate task, so to speak, to really look at your passages before you use them in the testing, is that if you have systematic procedures in place, you can then sort of argue for the correctness of the inclusion of this text. And this is going to give your test a higher level of validity. And with validity here, we mean that is testing what it's supposed to test. So we know that we have a text which is suitable for the students, suitable for the level, suitable for the items, and so on. And this you can then say to the students and to their parents or whoever it is else you have to debate it with. You can say, no, but we because we have these procedures in place. And this, of course, is not only for testing. You can do this as much as you like in your learning and teaching activities as well. And it's going to benefit you, and you are going to become more focused in what you're doing. So let's look at this. Let's start with selection. Now, text selection, of course, it should be driven by clear test specifications or clearly identified learning goals. Now, sometimes we have a specification for a test, which is quite detailed, but normally when we are teaching at in an intensive program and so on, we don't really have very long detailed specifications. I would encourage everyone to develop them, of course, but normally they're not in place. But we do normally have learning goals that we can start from. So we can sort of look at the course and see what are the goals of this course, what are the learning goals that are going to be achieved in this course. And from there, we start to create our assessment. So even though it's much more helpful to have all these details lined out for us, if you have your learning goals, you have a very good starting point. You also have to think about what are the sources that I'm going to be selecting my text from. Am I taking it from the textbook that I similar text? Do I have one or more news sites, for example, or one or more other sources of text on the internet that I'm using? Do I use storybooks? What kind of graded readers and so on? It's very, very important, I think, from my experience, to be specific about what your sources are. What kind of text are you looking for? What kind of sourcing are you looking to use? Because open-ended searches for texts are not going to be very effective. That would just take you a lot longer. So defining your sources or your groups of sources before you get started is going to be very helpful. Now, in this example that we will be using, I have pre-selected the text, which is for academic English at CFR level B1 and B2. We will look at that when we get to the next. Now, I'm going to show some techniques now for analyzing the texts. And we will get some results and some outputs that we can try to interpret. But I have to underscore, and I will iterate this again, is that when we are doing this, yes, we have these tools available that I will show you soon. But at the end of the day, you as the teacher or the program manager or whatever you may be, in your role, you really have to use your professional judgment when you are doing this. You will get some information by analyzing texts using different types of software that we will display. But at the end of the day, it's your judgment whether this text is suitable or not. Yes. Now, you will notice that the things we are going to show here have a focus on vocabulary, and there are several very simple explanations to that. Vocabulary has a very strong demonstrated effect on passage difficulty. It's probably the one factor that affects text difficulty the most. Is what kind of vocabulary do we find in it. So to focus on vocabulary when we are analyzing texts for inclusion in our tests is a quite effective method. It's also the case that the tools that we have available, they don't really go beyond vocabulary much. At least not those that we can use effectively and get informed, get the quality information from. Now, here are a couple of sort of rules of thumb that we like to use. Now, if we have a reading comprehension text, if a learner is to comprehend this text in general, then 95% of the vocabulary items need to be familiar to them, right? So if there's only 85 or 90%, they will not be able to get a general idea about the text or a general comprehension of, or achieve a general comprehension of the text. They may pick up some information here and there. They may be able to kind of understand what the text is about and so on. But if you really want them to interact with the text and you want to write items where they actually show comprehension of the text in different ways, you have to make sure that about 95% of the vocabulary items that are in the text are familiar to the learners. And familiar to the learners in this text means that is at approximately the same CFR level, A1, B1, A2, B2, whatever, that the learners are at and that you are writing your test. For listening comprehension, we need to raise the bar a little bit. We need to go to 98%. This is a debate back and forward between, on this, and I'm not going to go into that. But if you set yourself at 95 or 98% for both RC and LC, you are about difficulty level using vocabulary. Before we go to that, though, we're going to talk about okay, I'm getting a net connection. Please let me know if you can't hear me.
Yeah, it cut off just a little bit.
Okay, it should be okay now, right?
It seems fine right now.
Good. So we have what we call natural language processing tools, or NL. And these can be used to analyze text to see how accessible they are to different groups of learners. There is one very advanced tool called Commetrics. We're not going to use it here, but I want to mention it. So if someone wants to delve a bit deeper into this, you should look at, just Google Commetrics. It will take you to their website. It's free to use, and it's a very advanced tool for analyzing text, but it's not immediately applicable to a teaching environment and in-house kind of testing environment. So we'll not demonstrate it here. We do have two other tools, however, which are very, very effective. And these are for CFR levels of vocabulary. One is the General Scale of English Teacher Toolkit, which is produced by Pearson. And the other one is English Vocabulary Profile, which is a project led by Cambridge University. These are applicable to texts. You just put your text in there and it would analyze it for you. And these tools are free, but may sometimes require registration, which is very simple to go through. but they're free to use and they're very effective. Let's look at what we can do. Now, what we like to do when we are writing items, and in parallel sort of to the vocabulary analysis, is we like to model our passages. And what we mean by that is that we create a visual representation of the text structure. What are the parts that are in the text and how are they related? And the reason we want to do this is that this helps the writer and it helps the reviewer, if you have one, to sort of get an idea about what text is about, so that we're type. And you can do this in a number of different ways, which are very if you want to, again, go a little bit deeper with this and get a lot of details about it, there is a extensive description and templates that are available from the Pearls project in their item writing guide. So if you were to Google Pearls item writing guidelines, you would find a very extensive explanation about how to model different types of texts. But let's skip that for now. Let's go straight to the text we want to work with. You see, here is a text which is for an academic purpose. It's called Sustainability and Sustainable Development. Now, if we just look at, but in order for us to interact with the text better as item writers, as test developers, of the text to see what is actually in here, what is in the different paragraphs, what is the thing, right? So what we want to do is, I want you now, who is, I want you to just try out, right? Okay. I hope you can still hear me. I'm getting some warnings here, but let me try and repeat what I said one more time. What I would like you to do is, I would like you to look at this text that you have on the screen now, and I would like you to just get a pen and a paper and spend a couple of minutes trying to draw a model of this text, or what it looks like, what is actually inside this text. And an idea you can get from the previous slide, which is basically you just draw a few different boxes, put some information in them, and draw some, arrows between them, right? Something along this line, or these lines, of what you are seeing in front of you now, right? If we were to do the same thing with this text, what would that model look like, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give everyone 2 or 3 minutes. Get your pen and pencils out and just draw, read the text, and while you're doing that, draw a simple model of it. And once you have done that, I will show you how I modeled this text. There's no right or wrong in this, obviously. But it will be interesting for you to compare to your different models to mine, I think. So starting from now, let's take around 3 minutes and draw a visual representation of this text for yourselves.
Could we see the previous slide for just like a second?
So this is a which is to text course. So you kind of show how things are connected in the text, and then you look at these, or at this model, when you prepare to write your items.
Okay, you can go back.
Give it about 1 more minute. Perhaps you would lose a bit more actual, practice, but just for demonstration purposes, let's use another minute for this. Okay, I think we can continue from there. So this is how I modeled this particular passage. I thought that this is basically a text which gives definitions of sustainable development. So it talks about that there's a very large number of them. It then gives you the most common ones, which short-term and long-term implications. And then it sort of talks about factors to consider here. So this model that I have drawn for myself here, you may have drawn it differently, but what I think we can agree on is that having this visual representation for yourself, and if you are working with a colleague who is going to review your items and your test, it really helps to find some kind of common ground and clarity on what the passage is actually about. So when I start to write my items to the passage, I can look at this, and my reviewer can look at this, and we have common ground on where we what we can do and how we should be able to do it. This is something we have been doing at the National Center for Assessment with some of our tests for quite some time, and it's a very appreciated feature among writers and reviewers of this sort of explanation of the text. Let's move on to analyzing the text. So we have chosen it. I chose it, of course, based on my needs, which are academic English, just B1 and B2 levels. I have modeled the text. Now I want to analyze it a bit. So we think about this text. Is it suitable for B1 or B2? I have my CFR descriptors here. I'm looking to test both. I think this text looks suitable to my test in general, and I think it's going to fall within one of these two levels. So how do I get some more information about where to put my text? Which kind of level item should I?
Sorry, everybody. I think Mr. Norbum is having some connection issues at home. Let's just give him a second to reconnect.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
I apologize for this. I'm having
No worries.
Problems with my connection. Right. So I don't know how far I got. Lost you there, but what this slide?
Slide 13, the previous one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So English vocabulary profile comes with the extension program called Text Inspector, and in here you can put a text in like this one. 250 words are free to analyze. If you want more than that, you pay a very reasonable monthly subscription to do it. An institution can afford it without a problem. It's only a few hours a month. Now, I put it in, I press analyze, and what do I get? Well, I get the following. It takes the items, the vocabulary items from the text, and it puts it into different CFR levels. So I can see from my output here that I have, if we look at the sort of second line at each level, I can see the percentages that I'm getting at each level. So I have about 40%, 44% A1, 80% A2, and so on. And I have B1 and B2, and then I also have some C1, some C2, and some unlisted items. And if you look at the unlisted items, we can work those out pretty quickly. These are dates and numbers and names and so on. Those are very easy to deal with, right? I can just put them in any category I like at the level, because it's only because it's a number. It's not a vocabulary item as such. One moment, please. Yeah, okay. I was here. Um, I don't know. I got a chat message. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good. So we have these different vocabulary items put into different CFR levels. So what I do is I take these and I sort of tabulate them. So I get an idea about how many % of the actual words are going to be at the different levels. So I can see here they have some A1, some A2, some B1, and the total of B1 and below, so to speak, right? B1, A2, and A1 is 77%. And the total of B2 or below is 88%. So we mentioned before that we want to get to something like 95% of the level that they are at before we can use the text. So in this case, it looks like it would be difficult to use it even for B1 or for B2. But what I do is I can take my the items that are at too high a level, C1, C2, and the ones that are unlisted, and I can sort of look at them and see what can I do with these. I can do a couple of things. I can take them and I can put them through the second tool, which is the Gse Toolkit, and see if they have a different opinion about these words. Are they really at C1 or are they at C2? Or are they actually lower in their opinion, right? So I can get more information about this because the two tools, English Vocabulary Profile and the Gse Toolkit, they sometimes differ in the way that they grade the items to the levels. And then I can also do some manual editing here. I can look at my unlisted items, or I can look at my C1 and C2 item and see, are there like contractions, numbers? Is there terminology here? Sustainability, for example. Is it actually completely necessary to understand the word sustainability, to understand the text? So this is where professional judgment comes in, right? We look at the tools, we get information, and then we sort of process that information and filter it through our professional judgment, and then we come up with a decision. So if I were to do this now, I'm not going to go item by item, but if I were to do this now, I will put it in here. This is the Gse toolkit, right? I will get the following results. I will get 79% B1, and I will be at 93% B2. So now I'm getting quite close here. And I think this is almost ready to use for a B2 kind of test here, but I should not use it for a B1 test. It's too complex for that. So you see here how I have now first thought about my test purpose, right, which was to test academic English at levels B1 and B2. I then thought about what kind of sources I'm going to use for my passages, and I will take an academic textbook like I did here. I will then model my text to get a clearer idea about the structure of it, and then I will analyze it this way. Now, when I have gone through these different stages, I actually have a lot more information about this passage, and I can make a much more confident decision about including it in the text, in the test, excuse me. We can come back to the text with the slides with the toolkits at the end, so everyone can get the correct addresses and so on. I will return to that. That's a question which came up in the chat here. Now, there's a new feature to Gse, which is called Text Analyzer. It's less detailed than English Vocabulary Profile and Test Inspector. What you do here basically is you just put a text in here, and it gives you a CFR level of the text. It doesn't break down all the vocabulary and all the items and so on. It just gives you sort of a general judgment of your text. And this is effective perhaps when you are in a hurry, you're working fast, you want to get it done, which is the normal situation, of course, when you're teaching is you don't really have the time to sit with every text for a very long time and think about it and analyze it. Then this is a nice one for teaching and testing. You take your text, you put it in here, and it gives you an output. So for our particular text that we are talking about, it gives the following output. And we can see the core sort of issue here is that it says that this text is suitable for CFR level B2. There's a lot of underlying things with these tools, and particularly with this last one, there is not much research published about it yet. So I will recommend it on a general level, but English vocabulary profile is actually more research supported, at least for publication. But we got a very similar result, right? The sort of longer version, going through it with English vocabulary profile and invoking personal judgment and so on, we got to a similar result. We'll see that that is not always the case, but here it was. So to sum things up, always start your selection from your specification or learning goals. Consider limitations of these tools carefully. Now, English Forever Profile and the Pearson Teachers tools, which the GSE is part of, they have both theoretical and practical limitations. We should not trust them blindly. Now, we should also think about when we are working on texts, if we are editing them, that if we are editing them too much, changing them too much, we may impact their reliability, the readability, excuse me. And of course, invoke your professional judgment in everything you do. Now, here we go with the passages and the texts. Let's move on to items. And I'm going to walk through this rather quickly so that we have time to actually write a couple of items as well. Now, high quality items have two basic features. And they are that they are to specification, which can be your learning goals or can be a detailed document of some kind. And they apply good practice in the actual writing of the items. So we're always going to start by looking at our specification and or our learning goals. And then we are going to think a little bit. Which item type is most suitable here? Should I have a multiple choice? Should I have a short written answer? Should I have a matching test, where they have to decide which parts belong together and so on? And the choice of this should primarily be what is best to test this learning goal that I'm trying to do, right? Oftentimes, again, because of time pressure and so on, what we tend to do is we tend to go with the most practical one, which is normally multiple choice, right? It's quite quick to score and report and so on. And if we go to the short written answer, we have to have maybe a bit of a scoring guide. What is acceptable? What do we think about spelling? Is it just that they get the message across, or do they have to be exact? Do they have to be extensive, and so on, right? So each of these, of course, have their advantage and disadvantages. It's a well-designed multiple choice item can do a lot, but it cannot do what a short written item can do exactly, right? And perhaps not what a matching item can do. So we have to make these sort of informed judgments all the time what we're trying to test. Now, how do we make sure or try to get item to be to specification? Well, we look at our specification and or learning goals, and we see which one is more practical. So let's look at a couple of let's look at a couple of item types. There are a couple of questions showing up in the chat, but we will answer them at the end of the Q&A session. Now, let's here's a traditional item, which is a main idea item. If I'm trying to test main idea, we want the student to express to us, show to us that they understand the main idea in the passage. Well, I can do this by writing a stem or an actual question, which is like this: what is the main idea in the passage? And then I can think about, should I allow my students to just write an answer here? Well, the main idea is that, you know, item writing is important or something like that, right? Or should I maybe have a multiple choice with A, B, and C? So I give them the answers, and then I give them the options, and they have to choose the correct answer. I'm going to think about the two things which are above you on the screen here, or above this on the screen. What is more suitable for testing the learning goal, and what format is the most practical. I think about this considering how much language the students have or don't have, how much time they have to take the test, how much time I have to score it, and so on. Now, in a different scenario, like this one, we have sometimes we want to have students differentiating between fact and opinion, right? It's quite, especially in academic English, and we get a lot of this in, you know, the upper levels of our intensive language programs. So here, a different format may be more effective. So I may write an item which is something like, what is a fact and what is an opinion, you know, or what is the writer's opinion? And then I sort of list a few statements from the text, and they have to check fact or opinion. This is probably more effective than using a multiple choice, because here I can get multiple facts and multiple opinions from the passage, and I can test several of them quite quickly in just one item. If I were to do this with multiple choice, I would probably have to write one item for each statement I wanted to test. Let's say I want to test word meaning. I want to see if students know what a particular word in the text means. So in this case, my personal feeling is that a multiple choice is very effective. So I will write something like, this is just a made up stem. The word prevent, for example, in the passage is closest in meaning to, and then I give them a number of choices, one of them being the correct and three of them being incorrect. So this is just three very brief examples of how to consider what item format to use. Yes, we don't have time to go into the details of good practice in item writing, so I'm just going to mention three very quick points here. One is, when you are writing, particularly when you're writing listening comprehension and reading comprehension items, only focus on one learning goal at a time. Do not try to write items that encompass the whole course or multiple goals or anything like that. Just take one at a time. And then clearly with your item, whether it's a multiple choice or otherwise, guide the learner to the required action, to the action described in the learning goal, right? Make sure that they are triggered to do what is in the learning goal. When you are writing items for speaking and writing, of course, it's different. You're trying to test a lot of things at one time. But here we are trying to test only one thing at one time. I then get to I should then think about my stem and my options, the actual question and the options A, B, C, D, or if it's an open-ended answer. I have to make sure that there's a clear idea, very, very, very clear correct answer. You should not try to hide your correct answer or sort of bundle it sometimes or whatever. No, you are trying to see if they know this. If they know this, they should be able to find the correct answer. It should be very, very clear. If it's a multiple choice, that option, which is the correct answer, is clear that it's the correct option. There's nothing unclear about it, right? And if you have an open-ended kind of answer where they have to write themselves, you should have a scoring guide which clearly stipulates what the correct answer is. And of course, very important, keep it independent from other items in the test. My actual question or stem, should not be related to another question or stem or to another option in a different item and so on. Keep everything independent. One learning goal, keep it independent. And then we come to the third one. which is language. What kind of language should I be using in my items? Well, you see, the point is this. We want to know if they can take this action with the language. Can they find the main idea, for example, right? So I don't want to make my item linguistically complex. I want to make it as easy as I can, preferably in different type of guidelines we have from international organizations and so on. It says that you should try to put one level below the actual item. So if I'm writing a B2 item, I should try to make the language inside the item, the actual question and the options, at level B1 or even lower. And then I should try and make it as clear and concise and to the point as possible. Always use the active voice when you can, avoid any complex structures, and you make it positively worded when possible. You should only use negatives like not, never, and so on when it's absolutely necessary. These are some very short guidelines. There's a lot more to add, of course, but this is what we will be talking about today. Now, of course, can they do what they should be doing? That's the point. Not can they understand and decipher a complex item. Now, let's do this. We are going to take this text that we looked at before, the sustainability and sustainable development text, and we are going to write one item to this text. We will do like this with this session. We will extend it beyond 60 minutes for the actual working and presentation and working, and then we will have about 15 minutes of questions, I think, at the end, or 20 perhaps. But at this moment, what I want you to do is I want you to look at this text, and I want you to look at the descriptor or the learning goal, which is at the top of the screen. At the top of the screen, it says that the student or the test taker can distinguish between the main idea and related ideas in a simple academic text, right? In order to answer specific questions, right? So what we're trying to do here is to see, can we come up with an item, multiple choice, open-ended, short answer, matching, whatever we might feel is their best format. Can we come up with an item here which is testing what's in the learning goal at the top of the page? And whilst doing that, we have our model here, and we are going to do it this way. I will display the text and the model on the screen for you, and you will write the item based on that. And when you are writing it, you need to think about the learning goal, which is the identifying the main idea and other ideas. You need to think about how to write your stem and options. Should I have a multiple choice with ABC or ABCD? And what kind of language should how should I use language effectively in this? What I would like you to do is I would like you to write this item yourselves now. And I would like you to send your item through the chat function here in Zoom. And then we will take one or two of your items that you have written, and we will put them up on the screen here without identifying the writer, obviously. And we will have a little discussion about them and see what do we think about this item. Is it focusing on the learning goal? Does it have appropriate STEM, question and options? Is the language simple and unclear enough, or could it be improved? And so on, right? So I would like you to take 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, take this learning goal at the top of the page, take the text which is there, and try to write your item. And before we do that, let me keep this on the screen for a few seconds. I will leave this there for about a minute or so, and then we can then go back to the text and to write the item. And I would like to give you about 10 minutes, but let's say about 7 minutes, so that we can have time to look at it together and then sort of round off a little bit as well. Does that sound fair to everyone?
Yes, sure. I've written the instructions in the chat box if anybody wants to look back at them.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's give it about 7 or 8 minutes from now. Please post your items into the chat function, and then I will take them from there and bring them up on the screen. So this is the model we had here. And now comes the text. Here comes the text and the learning goal at the top of the screen. So 7 or 8 minutes from now. Thank you, everyone. Let's go.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone, so much for your contributions here. And let's look at a couple of the, we won't be able to cover all of them, of course, but let's look at a couple of the suggestions that we got from our colleagues here, right? So here we can have a text like we have one of these. The passage is about, and then we have a number of different options, and I assume that A is the intended correct answer here. Now, if we try and look at this from the perspectives of looking at the learning goal, and then looking at the STEM and the options, and then looking at the language, we can see that this passage is about. Now, about and main idea. We might sort of have what should I say? Some opinions here. About can be like topic as well, right? And topic and main idea are not necessarily the same thing, right? So I prefer myself to focus the STEM here and just say, what is the main idea? If we think, of course, that a concept like the main idea is familiar to our test takers, but at this level that we're talking about here, the B2 level, this is a very basic form of sort of meta language, main idea terminology, right? That they should be aware of. So as not to confuse topic with main idea, I prefer to write the STEM as what is the main idea of the passage, and that would still make a clear, correct option. One thing we have here, which we can see, is that the option C is considerably longer, right? This is not something we mentioned, but it's always good to try and keep your options as close as possible in terms of length. So what we could do here perhaps is, excuse me, we could take this and we could probably do something like this. If I do like that, I have now shortened that considerably. It's almost as long as the rest of the options, right? And it's still, I think, a strong distractor. The passage is about balance between society and economy and the environment. That's not what it's about. The main idea is not that anyway, right? So even if I remove that phrase that was at the start, I still have a correct answer. And this is really how we should be processing this. Apart from that, at face value and quick look, this looks like a well-crafted item. Change this to main idea, I would recommend, shorten that one, and then think about, can I make this even easier linguistically, and so on. Now, here are a couple of other suggestions that came in. Underline all the transitional phrases that indicate the supporting ideas in the following text. Could you do something like this? Yes, but you would have to, I think, try and phrase this considerably easier for the students and say something like, this text has a main idea, and it has several supporting ideas. And then you could say something like, your task is to underline words and phrases that show if an idea is a supporting idea, something like this, right? And then you play with it a bit, you review it a couple of times, you will come to a very clear and concise stem, and then that's their job. However, of course, if this is the thing, this is more like a, I would say, a teaching situation, right? On a large-scale exam, we would not write the item like this, simply because there are concepts and ideas and definitions and terms involved here, which will not be well known to a lot of students. But when you have been teaching this, which obviously you would have in this case with your students, then why not? That's a nice one. Or the only thing I would say then, if you wanted to do that, is I would take the text and I would ask a colleague to, or one or two colleagues, to solve the item for me, and see, do they agree on what they are? A couple of my teaching colleagues, and do they agree between themselves what these are, and do they agree with me about what they are? Because items like these can sometimes be a bit difficult to define exactly what the correct answer is. So this comes back to the idea about, yes, we can find out a lot when we are not from formats other than multiple choice, but we have to be very careful with the scoring guide. So as a general concept, yes, that is a one way of testing this. I would say it still, I think, is testing the learning goal that we are looking for. Then we have a very straightforward, what is the main idea in the text? And we can see that the options here are a number of different things. And what we could do, this is, as far as I can see, what this does is it takes actual snippets or quotes from the text, if I'm not mistaken, and makes them the main idea. And this is effective, of course, if the text has a very, I'm not sure this is the case, but it looks a little bit like some of these are like that to me. You can do this if of course, the text has a very clearly stated main idea. So not that the author says this is my main idea, but there is a phrase or something like that which really shows you what the main idea is. Then this is an effective way of doing this. I would, however, suggest making this shorter if possible. So it's important to look after our planet or something like that. We must balance economy and environment. Sustainable development means the same thing as sustainability, something like that. And just a little detail, if you look at A, sustainability is not simple and has many definitions. I believe that to be, if that is the correct answer, then there are a couple of things to say about that. We do not, we try to avoid negatives, right? And if we have a negative, which is the correct answer, then we need to have at least one other negative in the options so that it doesn't stand out linguistically and grammatically. And then we have a one at the end here. What is the difference between sustainability and sustainable development? This is open-ended. And this, of course, is if this is the main idea, if we believe this is the main idea of the text, and it helps, it does force the student to distinguish between main idea and related ideas, like it says in the learning goal, then that would work. But of course, you would have to have a very clear scoring guide. And again, with these open-ended ones, which is a bit like the first one with the underlining, ask your one or two colleagues to solve it for you and see if they come up with the same thing as you were intending. There are more items, of course, to look at, and we'd like to thank everyone for sending them in. But I think that unfortunately, and partly due to my poor internet connection, for which I really apologize, we should probably shift to questions and answer at this time. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you don't mind, you have just about 2 minutes left, but we can definitely start from now.
Yeah. So obviously, I wanted us to move on a little bit here and do other things. So I will just show you one screen. We are not going to have time to do this, but I just want to show you this screen then, if I may. Now, this is when we are writing listening comprehension items. We didn't get into that, but we have a couple of things that we need to consider other than when we are writing RC, or in addition to when we are writing RC. One of them is the instructions to the voice actors. How are they to present this? How fast should they speak? What kind of pulsation should they have? What kind of intonation? Should it be very clear? Should it sound natural? Should it be some parts be more emphasized than others, and so on? And when we are writing listening comprehension items, we want to avoid some kind of interference with reading comprehension. So we try to make the items as short as possible, so that it doesn't, the reading speed of the student doesn't affect their ability to answer the question. One option, one choice is to make your MCQ A, B, C only and remove the D and only have 3 options. And you have to consider, of course, how many times should they be allowed to listen to the recording? Should it be 1? Should it be 2? Or if it's some kind of computer testing, can they listen as many times as they want? And there are advantages and disadvantages to this. I would say, in my personal opinion, or in my opinion, when I work with the center with Gse, is that 1 is normally sufficient. This might sound a bit counterintuitive, but it's actually the case that research has shown that listening 2 times or does not really improve the performance of the student. Very, very marginally. And we have to use almost double the test time for our listening section if we're going to let them listen twice. So if your choice is 1 or 2, I would definitely go for 1. Okay, that was just a little quick recap there. I'm going to go and show you my final screen, which is this. And I will be ready to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norbum. We have 15 minutes for the Q&A, but if there's anything that you feel like you need to cover that you haven't covered for the rest of the slides, we can give some minutes to that, and then we can go back to the Q&A session, or go to it if you want to.
Okay, if I still have 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah, then we can just minus that from the Q&A time.
Okay, so yeah, okay. Well, I mean, what we could do then, I mean, do you want to start with the questions, or do you want me to?
Maybe you can finish up, and then we can go to the questions.
Okay, so let's skip this with the item writing for the listening comprehension at this point. But here's a little tip, something to do when you have written your items. You see, I create a grid like this, or a matrix where I have all my students, student 1 through 10, and then I have my items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And by doing this, what I do is I record each student score on each item. So if this is our items, in this example, we have items where you can either get 0 point or 1 point. So let's say this is a multiple choice test, for example. So when I do this, I will then get the score of my students on the right. So the first student only managed to answer 1 question correct, and the second student managed to answer 4 questions correct, and so on. And I have a couple of 5s and a 2, and so on. Now, this is the information we always gather about the students, right? We want to know their score on the test. And if we were to take the time, if we have the time to just enter the items and the student answers in this way, and this can be, like I said, in this case, multiple choice 0, 1, or if it's a short answer, you can get 0, 1, or 2, or so on, right? If I put the scores of the students into my grid here, I can then use the bottom line that you see there as well, and then I get an average of the students as they answer the items. So I can see that, okay, the first item there, item number 1, right at the bottom, I have an average of 0.6. So 6 out of 10 students got this item correct. If I move to item 2, I see that I have a 0.8, so 8 out of 10 students got it correct, which means that I now know something about my item. I know that item 2 is easier than item 1, at least with these students, because 6 out of 10 got the first right, and 8 out of 10 got the second right. And if I move to my third item, I see I have an average of 3. So only 3 out of 10 got it right. So it's quite challenging, right? And I can see then 0.6, 0.9 very easy and so on. And this is very good information. It tells me something about my students, but it also tells me a lot about my items. So if I wanted to reuse these items in a future test, then I can say, okay, I want to have a few rather easy items here in the beginning. So I will start with probably what is item 5 here would be a good start. So I start with an easy item in the test, make the students comfortable and so on. And then I will make it more and more difficult as they progress. So item 3 should probably be my last item because it's the most difficult one, right? So I don't shock my students in the beginning and then, they lose their confidence and so on. So doing a very, very simple statistical analysis like this can actually be quite informative if you use it correctly. And it's actually worth, even though I know we don't have time as teachers, perhaps we don't feel we have time to do this, it is worth to do this. You don't need any software except an Excel, open an Excel sheet and so on, and you can do something with it. That's just a little tip, which was not the topic of the workshop here, but something to try out. I think now we should go to Q&A and see if there are any, or otherwise we
Thank
wrap
you
things
very
up.
much. Yes, thank you very much. So there is one question in the Q&A, and for anybody else who wants to share any thoughts or questions with Mr. Norbum, I'm going to put his email in the chat box. But we have a question asking about mixing in terms of level. When you have like a B2 test, is it okay or is it acceptable to have 50 or 60% B1 level vocab words in the test?
Yeah, what you need to think about is what the total is going to be, in terms of B2 and below, so to speak, right? So yes, it's perfectly okay to have 50 or 60% B1, as long as the total, when I count A1, A2, B1, and B2, if I have a B2 text, I count all the way up to the level of the test, the text that the CFR level that I want the text to be at. So in this case, I would put A1, A2, B1, and B2 together, and then I should get to 95%. And then within these categories, so to speak, it's perfectly fine if it's a lot of B2 or a lot of B1 or and so on. It's not a problem at all.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. It was really interesting. And I would like to thank everybody for spending their day with us, for the people that sent in the questions and that participated as well. Thank you to our speakers and our presenters. We really appreciated your presence and your knowledge that you imparted on us. And if you guys want to please share any thoughts or any comments you have on the symposium or any of the talks, if you have a favorite or if one talk was particularly enriching to you, please feel free to tweet us using the hashtag PSUALR2020, and we'll put that in the chat box below. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you are.
Yes, thank you so much,
actually,
everyone.
Mr. Norbum, we have one question. Somebody was asking about good websites to access reading texts for exams.
Yes, so what I would suggest, and this is it's a bit I would say like this: there are sites there where they upload a lot of, for example, graded readers and a lot of different textbooks that have to do with teaching and learning English, right? These sites are pretty effective for this. However, they're not necessarily respecting copyright and so on. So I don't really want to mention any particular one, and point you in a direction of one which is might be questionable to use. So what I would say is that if you are looking at more, at least if you're looking at more complex things, like if you're teaching at the B1 and B2 levels for academics and so on, what you should search for is, undergraduate textbooks, for example. That will take you to a number of different sites, and then you will have to make your own decision about whether to use it or not, depending on how you view copyright issues and so on. So for that reason, I didn't include any links and so on in my presentation here.
Okay. And then we just have one request. If you can maybe go back to slide 16. I think it's the toolkit. And just a reminder to everybody, inshallah, the recording will be available in 2 weeks' time. And then that way you guys can peruse the slides at your own convenience.
Okay, so here is, yes, there you go. You have the English vocabulary profile, where you can put in single items on, single vocabulary items, if you like, and see the CFR level. And then we have text inspector, where you can do a text of 250 words at once. And then we have the second tool, of course, which is the General Scale of English Toolkit, the Gse Toolkit. It's very easy. The website for that is english.com. So that's very difficult to forget.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And if I may, just 30 seconds here at the end. We have a program at Gse where we are producing items, and the people who produce items for us are English language teachers. So we do recruit and train item writers every year at different points. If you are interested in becoming an item writer with us, you may send your CV to my address, which is at the bottom of the screen. And if and when we feel it's suitable, we will contact you and invite you to participate. Thank you so much, everyone. And I do appreciate your attention this time of the evening and on a weekend and everything. So much obliged. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Once again, thank you to everybody for attending, and we hope to see you guys, inshallah, in our next symposium, bidnillah.